Hello everyone and welcome back to Chess Programming Game Design with me. So in the last lesson what we did was make it so that when a pawn reaches the other side of the board, an event is triggered which enables our panels. I also said that I will figure out a fix so that the panel doesn't scale so badly. And that fix is basically just, instead of making this the child of this, we make them siblings. And make sure that this is rendered before you render the background. If you do this, and also make sure to move the anchors, let me just enable it, just to make sure that everything is fine, okay. So the anchors of switch pawn panel should be where you can see them right now, so on the corners of, and then of this, they should also be on the corners. The background, these should actually be here. I have no idea what's happened there. Oh, actually I do. I think I know. But it doesn't matter. So these should be on the brown panel which we created. And then we have the black pieces and the white pieces which work fine. So the black pieces and the white pieces, as you can see, do stretch slightly. If you really want to fix that, then the best way to go around it is probably to make another table using the script which we used for our board. So using the auto grid layout script, which I provided a download link in one of the previous videos. If you want to do that, sure, go ahead. The anchors for this shouldn't actually be here. The anchors for this should be somewhere around the pieces. Oops, I did not mean to spin that. So that they do not exit the panel like you saw happen there and there now. That's quite odd. Okay, so I just found out the big problem as to why things weren't working out the way I was expecting them to. If you zoom out, you will notice that the switch pawn panel canvas is massive. It's not supposed to be this big. It's only supposed to be the same size as our our main canvas. You don't want it any bigger than that. Now if we shrink it to that size and then resize these, and once you have resized it, you should have something that looks a bit like this. And when you try to stretch the screen, it should also resize. If it doesn't work, which it actually didn't for me, then you have to redo the whole thing in Unity, so redo the UI, and it worked for me. I have no idea why it was bugged. As you can see, even the letters are sharpened now. I had to completely delete everything and redo that, but now it should be fine. So in the last video, I mentioned that you will need to make 8 classes which inherit from pawn to piece on click. I have already made those, and they're called pawn to B queen, pawn to W rook, and so on. W is for white, B is for black. And I've also already put them in their respective places. So I've put the pawn to B bishop into the bishop slot here. And as you can see, I've done similar with the W queen and so on and so forth. So all that those classes have for now are just that they're inheriting from something. Let me just show you really quickly. And that's not the correct thing. I have too many things open right now. Here we go. So this is what I was talking about. We have 8 classes, all of which are inheriting from pawn to piece on click. I've even deleted the update and the start method because we're not actually going to need those. And now we can kind of use these to, or start using them so that when we click on them, an action happens. So hopefully this has fixed it. If you have any questions about how to fix this, if you're still having problems, then do feel free to ask me in the comments down below. But please make sure to leave details on what's happening, because I can't exactly read your mind, so that would help. But yeah, so now let's move back onto the scripting part. Before that, make sure to disable these separately, as well as the switch pawn panel, because at the start of the game you don't want them to be enabled. So in the last video I also mentioned that the pawn to piece on click class was a work in progress, and that was correct because, well, I have made quite a few changes to it. So let me just copy and paste it over. I did not go into too much detail, so I'm not going to say what I did in the last lesson. I'm just going to paste this in and then explain what it does. Of course, ignore the comments as they don't mean anything. They were just things I was trying out and debugging, as you saw, so to make sure that everything is working properly. So pawn to piece on click is the parent class of all of our pieces, of all of our things that we have here. I don't know what to call them. The pawn to whatever on click. So let me just get this back up. Here we go. So firstly, we have private square location of pawn. We set that initially to be equal to null. Once we click on it, or when we actually call this class, it is going to know what it is because we are going to pass into the set location of pawn method so that it changes the location of pawn. We need that so that we know where to put our new piece to. Because if we want to replace a piece, then we need to know where that piece was located so that we can swap it out for a queen. Then next we have the texture. So that's basically the raw image, which we do need to drag in. So for the black pieces, we go into pieces, we drag in the black bishop. You could do that by script, but I wouldn't recommend it, and I also am not too sure on how to do that using the script. If we do it this way, then we make sure that we have it set up the way we want it to be set up, so that when we call the swap of piece, instead of just changing the script that's in it, we also change the look so that the user knows that, oh, that's a queen, it's not a pawn anymore. Because otherwise it would behave like a queen, but it would look like a pawn, which it's not very good. It's not very good. Let's just save that really quickly. And again, too much stuff open. And good, so that's the reason I have that. Next we have the piece color display controller. Well, this is just the instance of this. Oh, I forgot to drag that in, didn't I? So if you remember, we had the piece color controller dragged into here, and then we also had switch pawn panel canvas, which was basically just this specific switch pawn panel canvas, which is the game object. Just find it right now. Switch pawn panel. If I can, this is quite annoying. And there's a search bar up here. Why didn't I just use that initially? It should be the second one. We can just delete the previous one because now we know that this is the working one. Good. Oh, it's missing, so it was the other one. So we put that in. And similarly to how we've called the white pieces canvas here, we call the switch pawn panel from the pieces selection. So I will explain that in just a second. So this is supposed to be the white pieces, and then we also select the black pieces. There we go. From all of these, we go on and select the switch pawn panel. It's the only one that's out there, the only one we've instantiated, that's the word I think I'm looking for. And so we can easily just select it. Make sure you're selecting from scene and not from assets, because if you select from assets, well, it doesn't exist, basically. And now that we have that selected on all of them, this is going to make a link between the two things. And so we can use that link to help us in the scripting. Next, I have this method which is set location of pawn. As I explained before, this just sets the location of pawn so that this current piece knows where the pawn that's moved to the other side of the panel is located, so that it can swap it out more easily for another piece. Then we have remove pawn. Remove pawn just destroys the old pawn. It just destroys the script. It doesn't destroy the visual element. So when we call destroy, destroy immediate, if you call just destroy, it doesn't work the way you would expect it to. You have to use destroy immediate. So when we call this destroy immediate on the pawn script of a pawn, what happens is, so let's take this pawn for example, this script completely disappears. It just gets deleted. That instance of the object is no longer available to use. And then we also set the remove from here, so the squares, because we call a square here, we don't call the piece. We said that the piece in square is null, just to make sure that everything is working properly. So once that's the script is destroyed, then we can more easily replace it with a queen script, which is what we want to do. The reason why we can't just disable the script is because, well, first of all, you can't, and we can't just ignore it because, well, we in square, let me just get that up really quickly. Inside of square, we have our set coordinates, set piece coordinates function. Or no, let me just find it. Get component in children piece. We use this inside of our square, which means that if we look for one piece, it might find the pawn, and that might cause a bug in our program, and we don't want that happening, so we just completely destroy the pawn. So that's why we have remove pawn. Then we have replace pawn. As you can see, this is a virtual, so public virtual void. That means that we are going to be able to override it in our other classes, which we are obviously going to do because for each class we need to do a different thing. So for now, what it does by default, just on pawn to piece on click, is remove pawn at the location of pawn, and then it just returns to normal. It doesn't set a new piece in. But inside of these, we will set the new piece. Then we have on pointer down, the same thing as we did before, using the two extra things we have here, as well as I pointer down handler. When we click on it, something happens. In our case, what we do when we click on it is call our virtual function or method, and that's all that happens. Because all of these inherit from this class, we don't have to define any of this except for this one method. So let's do that now. Let's start off with the queen, because, well, the queen is the most obvious choice to swap. I was looking at Wikipedia, it's like a 96% chance that people, or 96% of games, when the pawn gets a promotion, swap to a queen. Or maybe even higher, I don't remember exactly. So pawn to the white queen on click, let's just find that. So what we want to do is have this in here. Let's just keep consistent, put the curly brace there. We are going to make that method inside of our, whatever it is, inside of our piece. But let's just explain what this does for now. So first of all, we call the remove pawn at location of pawn, which has been inherited from, excuse the vehicles outside please, which has been inherited from pawn to piece on click, so we just remove the pawn at that location. Then we create a new piece, the queen, so queen added piece. You don't actually have to do this, but I think it makes it easier to do this part. You don't have to name this, you can just call this and it is going to work. But we did do this so that we can, again, more easily initialize. You will see what I mean by that. So queen added piece equals location of pawn, so the square at which the pawn is located, dot get component in children, canvas. So we're getting the canvas, which is of the square, or inside of the square game object. And game object, add component queen. So this basically just instantiates a new queen inside of the canvas. So what happens is this script gets deleted. Instead of it, we put a new script, the queen script, inside of it. It's not going to know any of these yet. However, we are going to do that using the other things which I haven't mentioned or talked about yet. So added piece initialize is going to set the piece coordinates and so on. Then add location of pawn.piece in square. So square again, piece in square, that's going to be the piece that is in the square. We've used that many times before. Game object. Get component in children, raw image. And there, that's not working because we haven't imported another library. There we go. Now it is going to work. We are going to need to paste that in. Get component in children. So what that does is gets this component, and then texture dot texture, this element or of the raw image equals this dot piece texture, and this dot piece texture is going to equal to whatever we've set the white queen to be equal to. So piece texture white queen, as you can see there. And then we call the piece controller dot returning to normal, so that the panel disappears and we can get on with our game. So then we do the same thing for all of the other classes which have inherited from pawn to piece on click. However, instead of doing queen here, the way we did for the queen, we put rook and their other respective classes depending on what they are. So now let's work on initialize. Everything else is the same, by the way, so we have the same things there, the same things everywhere. So let's work on initialize. We can actually just close this down and let's move on to our other part. So I've actually decided to split this video into two parts. I know that this video is a day late, but that's why there's going to be a video today as well as tomorrow. So in tomorrow's video we are actually going to get more into the scripting of the things to click. So until tomorrow, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please give me a like, share and subscribe. It encourages me to make more of these videos and it helps me out. Also, if you have any questions, as always, do feel free to ask in the comments down below. Other than that, once again, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.